Not waiting. Whew. Okay. Hello, welcome to my cake kitchen. I'm Gladys. Oh gosh. I'm Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. We started the making of a baby shower cake yesterday, which we are continuing today. Part 1, which was yesterday, or episode 1 of the series, I baked a vanilla cake. If you want to go catch up on how I made that, it's a simple vanilla cake recipe, but the purpose of this tutorial is to take you from the start of the bake to the end of the process. Essentially, it's a simplistic vanilla cake that is going to be decorated very gender neutral. In fact, it's going to be a white cake that I will put together with some sort of flowers for a family friend, actually. So that's going to be a simple cake, but I thought it would be a great opportunity to bring you along the journey so that I can hand you simplistic resources in terms of tips and tricks on how to achieve great results when making a baby shower cake. So without wasting your time, these lives are normally scheduled for much earlier. I've just had to make a quick adjustment for the timing for this week and probably next, because kids are on a school break and my commitment has shifted slightly. With that said, I'm incredibly grateful for your patience and for being here. There's Lollipop in the chat. Lollipop, darling, how are you? Great to have you. It must have felt like I was never going to come today. I was. If I didn't, I would have put that in the community post. I did know I was going to come, but it's been a lot today happening. So I just thought, it's better late than never. So it's great to still be here nonetheless. And I hope you are all keeping well. With that said, I have already gone ahead and torted the cake. Because sometimes, even though with my best intention to get the cake all done together over here, it can be literally difficult kind of doing all the moving parts. So I've gone ahead and torted the cakes, and I have complete beginner friendly videos on the channel showing you how to torte a cake and everything else in between. The cake we made yesterday was very level from the top and everything, so I didn't have to do much. I have a simple leveler, and if you go back to my essential tools video, I have made recommendations for simple items that you need to put a cake like this together. With that said, our other friend and moderator is in the chat, and that would be Tapita. Tapita, darling, how are you? Now, besides torting the cake, I have a cake board that works as my cake surface, and I have a cake card on the work surface. I talk through this all the time. Every time I have made a cake, I've taken time to talk you through this. And the simple reason is that you'll find different people using different methods. One is not better than the other, or there is no comparison necessarily between the two. I just like to explain the intention behind what I use, my processes, and why I use them, just so that they are understandable for you, so that if you choose to use my process, it will enhance your decorating experience. With that said, we have a simple turntable here. I recommend that as part of my beginner basics video, and if you want to see that, you can go back and check. The good thing about the beginner basics video is that the video is made with just a complete beginner in mind, so it's not a bunch of stuff that I'm chucking at you or recommending for you simply because. I recommended them specifically with the intention that you will make use of them, or they will be useful for you. And my hope in the beginner series, beginner basics series, is to come back and make different sorts of videos using the exact equipments that I recommended, just so that it continues to be a resource or a go-to place for you to pick up some tools and equipment that you would want to have in your baking or decorating journey. With that said, there is Chantilly. Chantilly, darling, how are you, my darling? I hope you are very well. Great to have you. Our lives are a little late today, but if you've been here all week, I have been apologizing for the slight disruption and adaptation in the times, because my commitments have slightly changed for the next week or two because of the Easter school break. I have a kid who is in my background who is sometimes a little bit noisy, interrupts the live sometimes, even though he doesn't want to be on here. And the other thing also is he requires my attention, you know, and I can't do both. So I am incredibly grateful for your patience and understanding for the slight changes that have had to happen. With that said, we are kind of filling and stacking this vanilla cake we baked yesterday. You can check out that video in the previous live, which is already up. And like I said, I've gone ahead and torted the cake, and I was talking about my intention for putting this together, this sort of work surface together. And over here I have the cake drum. The cake drum, the cake drum has dual purpose here. It serves as a display surface for cakes when your cake is completely decorated. I like to cover my cake drum with fondant so that it makes for a presentable work surface, if you like. But some people opt for not a cake drum, but what you call a masonette board. So if you've noticed, some decorators or creators, cake making creators will have a board that is white. Now the board is made in such a way that you can display cake on it without actually having to cover it or do anything. The surface is also very clear in that the material that it is made of doesn't tend to absorb any liquids or anything. So it's pretty fair. Sometimes you can have them as very thin MDF boards. There are different materials here, and one is not better than the other. The only consideration to make when you're picking a cake drum or a cake board is that the material is at least food safe, or you can ensure that you can prep it to make sure it is food safe. Now, the word food safe is simply not so much the thing being edible. It focuses on the material being a lot more hygienic and food friendly, if you like. So if it comes into contact with food, it's not going to poison you, it's not going to kill you, but it's not something that is going to adversely affect your food for that matter. So over here there is like a foil surface. So if I'm using the foil lined boards or cards, that is pretty much safe. So the difference between the cake board and the cake card here is that the cake card is thinner, and the use of the cake card has many purposes. I am sure I will come back. Thank you, darling. I think since, look at me going off on a tangent. Chantilly, thank you. Chantilly is complimenting my eyelashes. I keep telling you, Chantilly, they're not mine, but I know what you mean, because since you complimented my lashes, every time I go to draw them, I have to smile a little bit at myself. Look at me. Anyway, let's get back to cake decorating. So the cake card... The difference between the cake card and the cake board, I would say, is that whilst for me right now, the cake board serves as a work surface, generally I use cake boards as display options for my cake. I use cake boards as display options for my cake. Now, the cake card serves primarily as a purpose of staying under your cake, and there's a reason for that, because recently I saw a question in a caking group where a beginner baker was asking the question whether they necessarily need a cake card or a cake drum, and I had to answer the question by providing the essential reasons why you need a cake card. While some decorators might skip the use of a cake card, the reason for a cake card in this context is that because I am working on a work surface, this is not going to be the final display surface of my cake. My cake will be transferred, in fact, from my work surface when it's done onto a fondant covered board with a ribbon trim. So during the transfer of the cake, I need something that seals the cake in. Naturally, by having the cake card under the cake means that it seals the cake in completely, which means the bottom of the cake is not exposed to the surface on which I am working. And that lends to the cake being safe and also being food safe. Also, when I come to transferring the cake, having to lift the cake, the cake card serves as a barrier between the cake and the surface from which I will be lifting the cake off. By so doing, I don't poke into the cake, it doesn't affect the cake. And actually, the cake card also has a very important thing it does here, which is that it serves to also, in certain aspects of the cake decorating process, it serves to break the weight of the cake. For instance, if you're using a dowel in between the cakes, sometimes you need a smaller card to fit in between the cake, which then helps to take on the weight of the towering layers. So that's the intention for the cake card. But primarily today, because I'm making a very small cake, the cake card simply serves as a protective mechanism and also helps to seal in the cake completely. So that's the intention here. I have a cake board, a cake card, over a turntable. A turntable helps me to kind of work with the cake and maneuver it in terms of movement and everything else, which makes for ease and efficient working. That's all. With that said, our cake is obviously torted, and like I mentioned earlier, you can go and check out some of my beginner friendly videos on how to tort a cake, and that should be all right. Some of the working tools I will have today is a silicone spatula, and that is more for either stirring into my buttercream, or an offset spatula that will be used for getting some ganache, right? I am working with ganache and buttercream, and both have their places here. I'll be explaining all of that in a moment, but once I'm going to be starting with the ganache here, and for the cake card to be attached to the cake drum over here, I have applied a bit of ganache. I've done that in advance just to save myself a bit of time. Now, applying your cake card to the cake board in a very, as it's glued over here, it's important. Why is that so important? It's important to stop the cake card from shifting around. I find ganache is very effective for gluing the card to the board safely for me, right? But some people would opt for buttercream. If you opt for buttercream, you want to make sure that you set it in the fridge or freezer before you get to use it. Also bear in mind, even if it glues on or it sticks, at some point it will come to room temperature, and then the buttercream will begin to shift and slide, which is not so much a case with my ganache over here. So that is where we are on the cake card being glued to the cake drum. With that in mind, I am going to apply some more ganache over here on top, which is very important. You'll find that in cake decorating, right, it's a series of small little tasks that probably are very thankless and almost seem like nothing, but following those meticulously will help guarantee you great results. Of course, having made the cake yesterday, I could have just chilled the cake yesterday and it got into work. The reason why I didn't do that necessarily is because I wanted the cake layers to rest, settle completely. And I remembered making a short series where I spoke about how the process of cake decorating actually mirrors life in a way, because at some point you'll come to realize that you can't force life to happen as quickly as you want. You just have to accept and surrender to the process. And there is an element and a lesson to be learned about the process of cake decorating, which means that cake decorating requires a lot of you, your time and your patience to observe processes meticulously, to make sure that things are done right. And if you look closely, all your tasks are broken into sections, and if you follow them meticulously, they should guarantee you great results. With that said, I have the first layer of cake over on the cake card, and as you can see, because I glued the cake to the card with ganache, it has set over here. Now over here, come to think about it, the cake card, for those of you who would like to know, it's 6 inch. The 6-inch cake card means that it is the same as the cake board, which means it will sit flush with the cake and help secure the cake from the bottom up. Sometimes other people have used a smaller cake card. I think I have on a very rare occasion used a 5-inch, but I then have to be mindful of when I'm trying to lift off the cake. So a good tip here, use the same diameter of a cake card just as the cake when you come to doing that. Now I am using some leftover Swiss meringue buttercream that I made and left to sit and chilled it. I nearly melted it off in the microwave, but here we are, right? So all I'm doing is spreading the buttercream over the top using a spatula. Now I could use an offset spatula to ensure a level top, which is something I may just consider doing. An offset spatula here. Now the layering of a cake with buttercream is not just something you do for doing sake. Every process here is important because you want to make sure your buttercream is level on the top, just so that your cake will be level as well. And if you are struggling with these processes, I'll say this. I came across a professional baker who actually was suggesting the use of pre-bought cakes for their business. And I actually thought, oh, that's... So you don't have to be a baker to be a decorator, you know. You don't. I just happen to enjoy both, okay? And I think the control freak in me wants both, for that matter, just so that I know what I'm dealing with. But you don't really have to be a baker. You don't have to be a baker. I probably missed something. There's Bernard. Okay. Hi, Bernard. You're right over there. A new person who's just joined us. Whilst we're at it, if you're finding any value in our videos, do consider joining the community here. We are friendly and we are very supportive. I feel like sometimes I have to just say that, isn't it? But if you find some value here, we don't have to convince you. Join us. You're welcome. Okay. And then there's the third layer here. Then I'm gonna go and cover that. There's not much buttercream here, and that is just by intention because the customer prefers just a manageable or small level of buttercream. So I am not adding any more than it needs. And you can see I'm probably eyeballing this, and that's just because perhaps my experience counts. But if you're a complete beginner, please don't eyeball stuff. Yeah, use use a piping bag. There you have it. And then I am going to flip this cake over, and there you have it. This cake actually is a 6-inch, what you call a typical 6-inch 4-layered cake, and put together it will serve up to 24. Okay, if you follow the 7 recommendations, this cake should serve 24. Now bear with me, I'm just getting some tissue. Right, so that's it. On this note, if you have your cake all put together to this level, it is recommended that you chill your cake completely. The question of chilling is very subjective and one that requires some context. Because if you chill your cake completely and it doesn't come to room temperature and you try to cover it, by the time the cake sets, it will try to defrost. And if you cover it in fondant whilst it's set and not defrosted, it will break through and your cake will crack, right? So chilling it is just making sure that the cake is just about set enough so that you can continue to work with it without creating more problems for yourself. At this point, if you're a complete beginner, it is probably best to have a look at the cake itself and to ensure that the cake is level. So that is what I'm doing, and I'm using my scraping tool here to clean the edges of the cake. All right, so that is all done now, and the cake has to be left to set completely at this point. Now here's the question. There's a conversation going on in the chat that I was just trying to track. Okay, so at this point, this cake is completely done. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it in the fridge to set a little bit for me whilst I come back and prep so that we can crumb coat this cake in ganache. Okay, now I'm going to set it in the fridge over there. So if I step out of the chat, bear with me. I'll be back shortly. Right, there you go. We're back. Now, oh God, I have ganache here. It is such a mess. Let me... Well, our ganache is already prepped and set to go, except I left it at room temperature after whipping it, and it's set completely, so it will require some work to bring it back. But as our baking basics develops, I am confident I will be back to discuss ganache and probably undertake a whole ganache class. Okay, let's sit tight and wait for me over there whilst we're at it. Not today, but of course, the reason why I'm covering this cake in ganache is that I have opted for to cover this cake in fondant. One sec, I'm just melting the ganache. Dolly, darling. Hiya, look at you. Are you finished from the... Are you finished from the day's work, Dolly? Welcome back. This week is school holiday, so we are just like working with what we've got. But even after after this live, I'm going to be filming. So if you're in the chat, here's something. Beginners basics. I'm gonna be filming a Victoria sponge. Victoria, is it Victoria sandwich? It's a sponge, but it's called a Victoria sandwich. You've acquired a scone. What am I missing in the chat, people? Okay, so lollipop, Tapita. Tapita, have I said hello to you, darling? Tapita and Chantilly. Have I said, I know I did say hello to Chantilly. Tapita, have I said hello to you? It's Bernard. Oh, Dolly, you finished from the day's work. I see. How was your day? I hope you've had a good day, though. And how is baking? Right. So, whilst in the demonstration, the decorating demonstration, I was talking about today landing on a sort of TikTok creator, a very popular creator actually, and a very established cake business. And they make some amazing cakes. And tell me what, they said they don't bake their own cake. That was like, no judgment, but it was such like, that's why you have to ask the question sometimes and don't make assumptions, because their cakes are amazing and they're actually an established business. I don't want to get the name wrong. I think I don't want to get the name wrong. And guess what? Such an amazing cake. Their open secret. Of course, if they're sharing it, then it means they don't mind. They're like, I don't bake. And they explained why. They said when they started baking, when they started their business, they weren't very confident baking. And they spent a lot of their time getting things wrong. So because of that, they decided that they were going to be making they were going to be using pre-made cakes. And ever since, they've been making pre-made cakes. And I was like, my brain couldn't. I was like, oh, wow. But they make such amazing cakes. And of course, it definitely hasn't affected their business. So here's an encouragement to you. If you are just starting your baking and decorating and you feel like, look, I just cannot handle it or I can't do it. Look, you can, and you don't have to know everything at all, right? What I have done here is that I have the ganache, and if you're joining us on replay, we are going to just crumb coat and cover our cake in ganache. And the reason why I have chosen ganache is because ganache is a lot more stable than the use of buttercream. And of course, you will know if you're using ganache, you want to make sure that your tools are warmer. I'm going to go back and get the cake and bring it back, and then we can start. I'm going for a rustic finish to this cake, and because it's for a family member or a family friend, I am actually not obsessed with trimming this cake at all. But if you've been on this channel, you would have seen me trim a cake or two over here. Something I highly recommend for a cleaner, polished look to your cake, except I'm not really going for that with this cake. So just covering the outside of the cake. And because I haven't trimmed the cake, I don't have much crumbs, but it's not so much how much crumbs you've got. It's a case of just making sure that even the smallest of crumbs are sealed in. But I am applying the all-in-one technique where I am crumb coating and covering the cake, and that takes a different technique where I am adding more ganache than it needs. This is what you call minimal effort, low maintenance cake, right? And because it's going to be a fondant cake, I am not completely obsessed with trying to get it perfect. it's level on the top, and I'm going to go in here, slide this all the way around and lift, and that's it. And then I go back in. It's important you wipe your scraping tool, and then I go back in. If you are just starting, this is going to take you a few more tries, trial and error, but you should be all right. Okay, so there we have, and I'm gonna go all the way up here and slide and lift. People talking about scones. The Americans, is that, Tabitha, is the scone what you guys call biscuit, or they are two different things? Like, I'm like, why do the Americans have to go and change everything by name though? Why do you guys have to do that? But I'm not trying to start a war. Just okay, we've cleared this. Okay, there it goes. And slow lift. Okay, so can we see how low effort this looks? Because by the time I come to add fondant to this, we are done, and then it will just have some floral details. Lollipop popovers, what is that? Is that American Yorkshire's pudding? Darling, I have no idea. Tabitha, I love you guys, but oh my people, you like to just change things by name, and I'm like, why? It's still English. Leave things alone. No, I think you guys literally just fought a war and then packed your stuff and was like, any way we can distance ourselves from all these people who try to colonize us. Okay. Okay. A biscuit is familiar to a scone, but not sweet. I don't think a scone is sweet either. Is it? I'm a baker, but I don't know about it. No, scones are not that sweet. Of course, if people make their own recipes out of it, they will add sugar and then it's sweet. But is a real scone meant to be sweet? Oh, look, I'm not trying to start a food war. Let's stick with the cake, okay? Now, I think the cake is fairly covered. I need it to set before I trim the top, before we do the fondant. I think the fondant covering will be tomorrow. Okay, it won't be today. Yeah, that's why they add the jam, lollipop. Yeah. So anyway, so here's our cake. It's almost crumb coated and covered, and that's the beauty of ganache, because when you ganache a cake, it can almost kind of set for you, and that is the cake sort of covered. I'm going to leave it in the fridge again to let it set completely so we can trim it, because the filling and the stacking and the covering is completely done for today. And then perhaps tomorrow we will cover it in a layer of fondant, get it polished. It's just such a low maintenance cake. I'm not doing much to it. It's so low maintenance. I'm just looking at finishing it up, decorating, adding the detail. The boys have just come in, so the door is slamming over there. Let me just, producer, I need some help here. Can you help me? Yeah, pass this cake into the baking fridge. Yeah, there is a square cake. Just leave it on top of the square cake. Thank you. Right. So at least I've got some help, and I don't have to get out of the shot. So that's helpful, right? There is little producer on the other side of the camera, and if you touch it, I'm going to tell everybody about you.
All right, come on, upstairs. Let's go.
No, he likes to wind me up a little bit, and I like to wind him up a little bit. I'm kidding. Yeah, because what you guys don't see was that he was on the camera, on the other side of the camera, and he was he likes to kind of wind me up as though he's gonna press something he shouldn't be pressing, but that's just by the way. He is such a little, what do I call him? A little urchin. Okay, right, now we've got the leftover ganache. I'm gonna put it away. Ugh, why do I have ganache on my other screen? It's annoying. Okay, right, let's get this all cleaned out. Okay, so so a biscuit is corn dough with a scone dough without any sugar. Oh, kind of makes sense. You know what? So scones are the same then. You know what? This whole thing about scone and biscuits is just a little confusing for me at this minute. Okay, so I'm just going to leave the scone. maybe let's Google it. What's the difference between a scone and a biscuit? Let's Google it and see if we can find answers to that.
Biscuit is the American one.
Yeah, but are they the same thing? Sometimes it's a variation, but
similar. But the Americans have it savory.
Oh, okay.
They have it with what they call gravy, which is not our gravy. It's like a white bechamel sauce.
People, can you hear? The cultured producer is educating us about American biscuit. The Americans in the chat, do you have your biscuit with gravy? Because the producer has just explained that the American biscuit is more savory, which means it doesn't have sugar, and it's eaten with gravy. And is it gravy and what? Bechamel sauce? I have no idea. Don't quote me, okay? I make cakes. Hi, darling. RD is back. Okay. Okay. Served with gruel. Okay. You learn something every day. I didn't know. And yeah, I know now. Okay. So great. Great. So if you're American and you like gravy and biscuit, hello. It must be some good soul food though. How are we even talking about American gravy and biscuit and scone when we're supposed to be making a cake? Anyway, if you're just watching us on replay, what are we doing? We filled and stacked a 4-layered cake. The cake has been crumb coated and covered in ganache. We've left the cake to set completely in the fridge. And then we're waiting for that to be done. And then we'll trim it, fill it, get it done, and then come back and cover it in fondant. Now, what I don't know is whether I can come back after this live and cover it in fondant and just be done with it, or wait until tomorrow. I have some filming to do. I have work to do. So this is me just telling you what I'm thinking, because the week is going to be busy. We have the start of our Easter cake that we want to carve. That's a lot, and I'm thinking about it. And then there is the lollipops panda cake, which we will be making, and everything else in between. So we have a packed week, and then I have mothering duties. I mean, it's not like I ever get a break, right? But when school is on, you know the kids are gone and you can catch yourself a little break and do the things you want to do. But when they're home, what do? You just kind of carry on with it. So Lollipop going, tomorrow is fine because I need to do my chores. It's like, yeah, it might just be. I might just go on to make a muffin or bake a Victoria sponge. One of those will be all right. Yeah. Oh, so RD is validating the biscuit and gravy. It's a typical breakfast. Wow. With scrambled eggs. That sounds like a very healthy breakfast. And there is it Debo? Is it Debo? Hi there. Thank you. It's not that serious, okay? We make cakes over here, but thanks for the compliment. People, right. So if you're just catching us on replay, the cake is still in the fridge. We're waiting for it to set whilst we're talking American biscuit and scones, whether they're the same thing or not. It's a whole thing. You know what? I don't pretend to know any of this, but of course, you guys bring the connection and the conversation to the table, so you're welcome. Okay. Aldi says she where she is, they have the biscuit and gravy plus some scrambled egg. It must feel like such a wholesome breakfast. I mean, the scrambled eggs brings the protein element to the table, and the scone probably will fill you up better with a little bit of carbs over there. So I'm not even mad about it. I couldn't do chicken and waffles though. You don't like sweet with chicken. Whew. Yeah, the chicken with waffles. And is it, let me just keep quiet because I was going to ask what sauce goes on it. Is it maple sauce, maple syrup? Look, the best waffle I have had was made by a Canadian family friend. Actually, yeah, this lady I know, a friend of mine who makes, she's Canadian and she makes waffles. She doesn't sell them, okay? When I say she makes waffles, it's as if she makes them for sale. No, she used to make them as a treat for us to eat at home. And yeah, really lovely. I think the homemade ones are different from when you buy them. Because when I bought them in the pack and you have to microwave, they don't feel the same. Whereas the homemade one just feels like, oh, when you get a good recipe. So I've only ever known the homemade one, which are lovely. Okay, Dolly is asking, I saw that your ganache was white. What makes it like that? And I've decided to take a class. What do you think? Okay, so let's just unpack that whilst the cake is chilling. Dolly, are you talking about this ganache, or you've seen my ganache recipe, which makes it white? Which is it? Yeah, this ganache is white because I added some white food coloring in it. It's the you may have seen me use the same kind of food coloring. I don't know. It's you know what? I pre-made it. Okay, used it for a cake. Remember, the cake we're making is for a family friend. So I made it, and then the leftover. So everything I'm using for this cake is almost like leftover that has been kept preserved to be used. So the ganache looks white over here more so because I added white food coloring in it, just a little bit. I wasn't looking to color it white, but you can color your ganache to be white. Okay, that said, don't also forget that the impact of lights do affect how the element will look on camera. That's such a small detail to bear in mind. But yes, if you do see it as white, it doesn't have the tinge of yellow, strong tinge of yellow, which is very prominent with ganache, white chocolate ganache. And the reason being, I added a touch of food coloring in it. So that is something to note. But that said, what I also did with this ganache is I whipped it. When you whip it before use, the whipping has a place and there's context to it, which is why sometimes when I get ganache questions, I don't like to give a one overall answer, okay? So I've said here before, right, that because I use ganache, the intention to create a ganache some sort of ganache resource, as in a tutorial that is paid or whatever, it's in my future, because there are so many aspects of ganache. In fact, we know ganache for covering cakes, but there's also ganache for filling cakes, which are supposed to be different. The whole concept or idea of ganache is just cream mixed with chocolate, okay? Whether it's dark chocolate, milk chocolate, or white chocolate. But if you are focusing on one aspect of ganache making, which is ganache for covering cakes, there are different layers of it, right? So if you want to take a class, yes. If you have gotten to a point where you feel like, look, this is so confusing for me, I want to take a class on it, then yes. Here are some markers for you to consider if you're taking the class. If it's the class, what's the word? Is it valuable, and is it trustworthy? Where are you taking the class, and how are you taking it with? Because sometimes if you take the online class, unless it's holistic tutorial that covers all the stages, you might be left with questions. But if you have a tutor who has online class, in-person classes, even if it's online, so you're going to be interacting directly with the creator, then yes, take it, because you're going to be able to ask them questions so that you can feel fulfilled with the class, which is important. So it's neither here nor there. You just have to look at your circumstance, see where you're headed, and make a decision about that. And okay, so yes, Dolly, it's the ingenious edible. Yeah. And yeah, if it's a 1-to-1 and it covers everything, here's the thumbs up. Go for it. Why not? Okay, if you're confident it will cover everything, yeah, because then it will take away all the guesswork. Okay, one ganache recipe is not better than the other. In fact, I don't believe that my ganache recipe is very special. It's not. You'll find I've already posted it on the shorts. There are 6 sessions of that. Except the shorts doesn't cover all the intention behind why I make certain choices, because the choices I make about my the reason why I'm choosing certain chocolate elements and choosing the cream type and what I do. And in fact, since I made my first ganache till now, my recipe has evolved with time. Now I add a bit of corn syrup for a bit to make sure that the ganache holds a little more. So there are different things in each specific recipe, you know. So the question is, if your class is going to answer all the questions, make sure you have an objective of what you want covered. Because if it's about just knowing about ganache, the chocolate to cream mixture together, then I'm sure you can find that online, isn't it? But if you're taking the class, then identify your objectives and make sure that you're asking your tutor or you are asking questions in class that informs your objectives, thereby answering the questions you have. Okay, if you have more questions on this subject, let me know. But yes, the answer to the white is the ingenious edible white food coloring. Audi, you are craving what? Puff pastry with cream. That sounds yum, isn't it? Well, I want a chocolate chip muffin. I actually want to bake after the class. I said after the tutorial. I want to shoot a video for muffins and Victoria sponge, but I want the muffin, the jumbo muffin cases, and I don't have them, and it's annoying me. It's like, why? Okay. Let's see. Anyway, whilst we're at it and we're laughing, let's not forget why we're here. Our cake is still in the fridge. Let's go get it so we can trim it. I'll be back shortly. You are so welcome, Dolly. Right, so our cake is back. And it is sort of set on the outside. And this is just how much. You don't need it to chill completely to... You don't need it to chill set in a way where you feel like the cake has to be solid. As long as it's set to touch, you're fine. And what I'm doing is I'm just scraping the top of the cake. If you're a beginner, this is a quick way to get yourself sharp edges on the cake. But I'm going to fill this part just so that we have the cake a little more level than we have it now. Yeah. So I'm going back in with just... There you go. And I am going to fill the sides of the cake here. Just so that I can have a level cake. There you go. Okay. Okay. Right. There we are. Okay. I think as I'm kind of as I'm finishing the decorating of the cake with the ganache, I'm thinking to myself, why did I even want to go for a fondant cake? There's no reason for that. Probably because in my mind, because it's a gender neutral cake, I just thought it'd be easier. But I could equally go for a gender neutral cake that is still like presentable and pretty. And yeah, so maybe I've changed my mind. I don't know. Ignore me. All right. But otherwise, we have... I'm probably going to have to think about what my options are, because it's a baby shower cake. I'm like, I could actually get this done without actually making it into a fondant cake. What am I thinking? Yeah, because we can have gender neutral flowers on there, simplistic detail, and I can color the ganache here into, say, a brown or yellow color to add to it. I think, do I have a yellow? I think I do. If I look for it, I'll find. Okay, There we are. All right. Our cake is covered, okay, in ganache. That's a ganache covered cake. When using ganache or buttercream, how much should the thickness be? Okay, I'm going to answer this in the best way possible, but context matters, Dolly. So bear that in mind. The thickness of ganache or buttercream is relative to what you are doing. I'll explain. If you're making hyper-realistic cakes where you require the cake to keep its form, you probably need just enough. In this case, the buttercream or ganache serves the purpose of filling the surface of the cakes because you're doing a lot of carving, right? The first layer is obviously a crumb coat that covers the crumbs and seals all the crumbs in. And probably the next layer of buttercream or ganache you apply then serves to fill in any uneven surfaces and helps to keep the form. For hyper-realistic cakes, it is really important to know that for the cake to keep its form, when you add more ganache or buttercream on it, when the cake is set at room temperature, especially on a warm weather day, it will then begin to warp and the shape of the element will begin to change too, which can make it unstable. So remember that. And you've actually seen that happen on here on the live, because on the lives, all the near realistic cakes I've made, from the flower pot to the flower vase to the all the cakes that are almost like elements of realistic items that I recreated. If you go back and watch those videos, you'll find that the process of ganaching those cakes I added just a thin layer, okay? Which is why all those cakes were able to sit at room temperature for weeks and weeks and weeks before I cut them in. Because I have the advantage of the British weather that's not super hot, so a cake can sustain at room temperature. But also remember, those cakes were scrap cakes, so leaving them at room temperature didn't really affect the quality because nobody was going to eat them. But if we think about your cake in the context of people going to eat them, nobody will be leaving a cake on a work surface for a week. Okay, so for that reason, just adding a small layer on the cake just helps to keep the form of the cake. And eventually, once the cake is picked up, it is going to be eaten. So it will hardly have time to warp or change unless perhaps you have extreme weather conditions impacting on that. And that is just one exclusive context to ganaching or buttercreaming a cake. Now, when we talk about ganaching or buttercreaming your regular cake, you have to unpack your own objectives. Now, I should generalize by saying that the more you add to a cake, the more susceptible the cake is to falling apart or having structure issues. Because remember, whether you're using ganache or buttercream, weather is going to impact on it, especially at room temperature. And I'm not even talking your regular extreme weather conditions where the sun is against you. Any weather conditions that is outside of cold, bordering on room temperature to slightly warm, will impact the structure of a cake. So here's a generalized thought for you. Anytime you want to buttercream or ganache a cake, think about what the cake is going to be used for, where it's going to be set, the environment within where the cake is going to be displayed, and that should inform how much buttercream or ganache you can use on a cake. Whilst I'm saying that, I should also differentiate that ganache and buttercream perform different functions and have different advantages to the structure of a cake. Ganache being the most superior. Ganache will bring structure and present better to buttercream in terms of weather conditions. That said, the ratio of ganache can also be increased to mitigate the issue of weather. So I think you get more you get more out of using ganache. But there are going to be circumstances that will prevent the use of ganache, like when you have dietary issues to cater to, or specific reasons that may prohibit the use of ganache. So I am answering the question for both, whilst also highlighting the advantages of both. With that in mind, here is a general rule of thought. When you're applying ganache or buttercream to a cake, besides thinking about the objectives and the things I have already aforementioned, think about it this way. The more you add, the more problems you're likely to get. So your guide is always to make sure you add enough that the ganache or buttercream fills out the surface of the cake, okay, and evens it out. Because actually that is the main purpose of ganache or buttercream on a cake. Do you really need ganache or buttercream on a cake to cover it? No. Because think about fruit cakes. Fruit cakes do not need any of this drama. Fruit cakes just need a bit of marzipan to cover it, right? And the marzipan is attached to the cake using what? Sugar syrup or some sort of apricot. You know, it is kind of showered on the cake slightly or painted slightly on the cake, and then you add the marzipan, and then the fruit cake has its form. So if we are considering the principle of how fruit cakes are covered, do you really need a chunky or a thick layer of buttercream or ganache on a regular cake? No. The purpose of the ganache or buttercream on a cake, besides adding or advancing and enhancing the taste of your cake, because the amount of filling you have should also be relative to the amount that is covering the cake. So from that point of view, the whole purpose of buttercream or ganache on a cake is to fill out the surface so that the crumbs are set, which is the crumb coat layer, and then just enough ganache or buttercream to polish out and even out any unevenness, helping the cake to maintain structure and form. And for that, you just need about just a little bit. I'm not going to get into the technicalities of the numbers, but I guess I have provided you enough context. If the layer of ganache or buttercream is any more than 0.5 millimeters, which on this is it's even very thick, then that's too much. But that is set in opinion. That is not set in experience. All I'm saying is that if you have too much, the more you add to a cake, besides the cake itself, the more you're likely to have problems. So ask yourself, what conditions under which the cake is going to be handled? Is it necessary to add too much buttercream or ganache on a cake? And if you've noticed, when I was filling out this cake, I didn't trim it. You can go back and watch any of my trimmed videos, right? Any of my decorating videos where I am trimming. I did make a video where I spoke specifically about how much you can add to the cake in terms of ganache or buttercream. I don't think I was speaking about how much necessarily, but I did point out that when you trim a cake, you leave a small gap between the cake and the board, the cake card. So Dolly, before you came, I talked through the cake drum and the cake board, and the cake drum and the cake card. The cake card is a 6-inch, just like the cake. So the cake sits flush on it. Today, I made the decision not to trim the cake. So the ganache that you see has just filled out and edged out, but we still have an evenly covered cake. But if I really, really wanted to get to the very basics and get super pedantic with a finely presented 6-inch cake, I would trim the cake, but I would just trim the outside, leaving me maybe a gap of 0.3 millimeters or 0.5 millimeters, just enough that the ganache will cover the cake. So that is a long-winded way of answering your question, but I almost always feel like there is no shorter answer to the cake decorating processes except context and intention. Okay, so when you are filling a cake and decorating a cake, you have to almost look at your own circumstances, what is applicable to you, what you are trying to achieve, whilst also looking at the wider general context of the effective decorating processes that are out there for you. And I hope that answers the simple question of how much do you need? Okay. Right. With that said, you know what? I have somehow managed to change my mind. Don't judge me, okay? I'm a girl. I can change my mind about anything. I have changed my mind about making this a fondant cake because, to be honest, I don't fancy rolling the fondant. And secondly, I have a fondant cake to make for lollipop, which is the panda cake. So in real time, I have changed my mind, okay? We are going to be making this a non-fondant cake, okay? And for what it is worth, it's still a gender neutral color, and that's what we're going to stick with. So I'm going to color the rest of the ganache in a gender neutral color, which is, I'll go for a brown or yellow or something. You people are ever so kind. Let me just find my food coloring and then we'll talk some more, okay? Okay, so hear me. Here's your sign that if you have something to do and you are unsure and you keep changing your mind, it's all right. You can change your minds. Because in the time we have been here, I have changed my mind too. Right now, I've got to be extremely careful because the ganache I have here is not much. And if I get this coloring wrong, I'm going to have real issues, okay? That is brown. Let's see. Okay, let's see. Okay, let me just let this set in the microwave a little bit. Okay. Oh, look at me. I forgot the microwave is on full power. It will melt everything. Okay, right. Okay, we have some brown color here, which is not bad, but can we add some yellow? Okay. Okay. Actually, let me see. 1 second, people. Okay, it's not brown. It's not a brown color. People. What am I doing? Ignore me, okay? Ignore me. That is, you know what? I will tell you that I like it when people come with their own inspiration and thoughts about cakes they want and want me to create for them, because when you leave me to my devices, I am normally indecisive. I cannot decide quickly and I keep changing my mind and I don't know what I'm doing. Okay, look, I've ended up with a color that doesn't even apply to what I'm looking to do. I feel like, what have I done now, Glad? It's like, what have I done? You are actually watching in real time a very indecisive individual. A super indecisive individual who just doesn't know what to do with themselves. I've just added more brown, and I think I wanted it a little lighter than this. I don't know. I wanted it a little lighter. I don't like this color. You know what? Whilst I'm indecisive, I'm not going to do anything. Because I kind of feel like doing anything is just going to ruin what I need to do. Because with this color, there's so much I can do with this. I can just add some gold and neutral colors to it, and then we're done. But if I did anything with this brown, you know what? If you've just joined us on replay, I think my white food coloring is finished. That's it. I have to go and order a new batch. That's the problem. Let's see. Where is the white food coloring? Yep. You're watching it. You're watching in real time a decorator in crisis, okay? First of all, I ruined the color. And secondly, I've run out of food coloring, okay? So, hello people. It happens. I tell you, we don't come here to show you the perfection of all the perfect moment. We show you the raw moment. And if you decide to bake like I do, there will come a time whilst right in the middle of your baking, you'll forget an ingredient and then you search everywhere only to find out you don't even have any in store and you have to go 2 hours out to drive and get what you need, okay? It happens, and then you go, never mind, lollipop, never mind, okay? And on that note, I think we need to say goodbye to each other. Lollipop, go get the chores done. Dolly, go do whatever you need to do to master whatever needs mastering. Tapeta, give Mom a hug. And to the rest of you who have joined us today, thank you. I shall see you in my next video when I'm a little better organized and less chaotic. Have a good one, and I'll see you soon, okay? Bye.